Having a quality cam when live streaming can dramatically impact your viewers' experience. Every stream, your viewers can see your reactions, they get to see your personality, and ultimately they get to make a deeper connection with who you are. And while that's true, you may not need to spend hundreds of dollars on a fancy DSLR camera such as this one in order to draw an audience. Instead, you might go the less expensive route and grab a USB cam to get you by until you have the dollars to upgrade your setup. My name's Preacher, you guys. Welcome back to the Streamloots YouTube channel where we talk about everything streaming and Streamloots. And if you were like me, when you started out, you didn't have all of this disposable income to get the most expensive equipment to make your setup the best of the best. Instead, if you were like me, you had to start out small and make gradual upgrades, which is what I think is typical for most people who are looking at live streaming as a potential career path. In today's video, I'm going to take you through some of the general differences that you can expect to see between a USB camera and a DSLR camera, so that you can make the best decision when you want to upgrade your webcam for your live streaming experience. For the comparison, I'm going to be using my Sony a5100, which is the camera that I'm using here. And then I'll also be using my Logitech c920 camera, which you're going to see here. The main things that we're going to look at in this video between these two types of cameras is the ease of the setup of the camera, the frame rate and resolution of the camera, the focus and exposure of the camera, some of the features that you can expect to see with the cameras, the cost, obviously a very important feature, and also my thoughts and recommendations for you, depending on where you're at in your live streaming journey. With that being said, let's get into it. Okay, so let's start by talking about the ease of setup for both a USB cam like my Logitech c920 and a DSLR cam like my Sony a5100. So as far as ease of setup, let's talk about the Logitech c920 first. And I'll actually pull this up. You can get a first shot at what this camera looks like. So to start, really, this camera is plug and play. You literally plug in the USB cord. I think it's about a 5-foot cord into your PC and it's ready to use. The nice thing about this camera is that it actually has a clamping system that's really smooth that can mount right onto your monitor the way that I have it set up here. All right, so let's talk about the ease of setup for the DSLR Sony a5100 here. Okay, so for my Sony a5100, I've had to get a few extra things in order to make the setup really work. And a couple of the additions that I've had to get are a cam stand, and then I've also had to get a Elgato Cam Link, which is something that transmits the HDMI signal from the camera to your PC, and that actually is a pretty pricey investment if you're adding onto the camera price itself. I've also needed to buy an external power source that plugs into the wall for constant power, because the DSLR cameras, most of them have a function in them which will shut them off if they overheat. And so you need to have something external to power it constantly if you're using it for live streaming. Now, obviously, those things alone are going to add up the price, but we'll get to the cost in a little bit. For now, let's talk about the resolution and the frame rate. All right, so let's look at these side by side here when we're talking about the frame rate and the resolution. Now, the Sony a5100 DSLR is going to be able to capture a 1080p high definition video quality at 60 frames per second, while the Logitech c920 USB cam is going to be able to capture at 1080p, but only at 30 frames per second. Now, the only difference here is the frame rate, and I don't know if you can tell the difference between the two, but it is somewhat noticeable, and it's not noticeable enough to really feel like you need to spend the money on a DSLR camera, but it's definitely something to consider when you're talking about upgrading the production value of your webcam. Let's talk now a little bit about focus and exposure. Now, these are two different things, but they work together to get a really high quality look for any camera. So the Logitech c920 in its specifications has something called autofocus, which most cameras nowadays, whether it's a webcam or a DSLR, have that, but the quality of autofocus is very different. So for example, in the Logitech c920, you're going to notice when I make the object in view, my hand, I draw it closer and further away to the camera, you're going to see a shift in the background right here. So when I come in and out, there's an obvious mechanism happening in the camera to navigate what the main object is. And this is something you might not want your viewers to see. It might not make a huge difference when you're just starting out, but it's something that's noticeable. When we look at the A5100, it really doesn't have any trouble and moves very quickly in capturing the main object in view to autofocus. And the A5100 uses something called fast hybrid autofocus. It's a sensor called the Exmor CMOS sensor, and it's a high quality sensor that makes those movements in the camera's ability to capture the object in view very easy. It should also be really important to note that lighting, so let's talk about exposure. Lighting is really important for the exposure that's being managed by your camera. So exposure is really your camera's ability to manage different lighting, and lighting is really crucial for the autofocus feature to work in any camera. But some cameras do a much better job of managing autofocus despite the lighting, whether there's a lot of it or very little lighting. So let's turn the lighting off in my room. I have two soft boxes on the left and right of my setup. Let's turn those off and just get a sense of how lighting can impact both of these cameras and what they do to manage low lighting in a setup like this. Okay, so now I've turned my soft lights off in my room, and you're going to notice a pretty stark difference in the camera's ability to stay focused and still have a richness in the quality. The Logitech c920 is having a very difficult time staying focused. The lighting is going up and down depending on what the object in view is as far as the distance to the camera. But with the A5100 DSLR camera, we see a pretty solid, consistent movement with this camera still, even in extremely low lighting. So a pretty stark difference between the two that you can expect to see between a USB cam and a DSLR camera. So let's talk about some of the features that you can expect to see with a DSLR camera versus a USB camera. So the Logitech c920 does come with a built-in mic, and a lot of USB cams do, although the mic quality really isn't that great. It's a room mic, captures a lot of sound, and it's probably not something that I would use for anything more than Skype calls or Zoom calls. It's not something that I would use for recording a YouTube video that I wanted to have high quality, or let's say your live stream. Now let's talk about the A5100. So the A5100 has a slew of features, and I'm not going to be able to cover all of them because there is literally way too many. But I will leave a link in the description below to all the specifications for this camera so you can check them out for yourself. But this camera does have a built-in mic. I haven't used it personally because, I mean, I have a Shure SM7B, and I would recommend to any live streamer to have a separate mic that's right up next to you that you can use and dial in. Typically, the mic that's built into the camera is going to be impacted by where the camera is placed in your room, and you're going to have a lot more control with something like this. The A5100 is also a digital camera, so you can use it for photography and take extremely high quality photos. If you're looking to brand yourself and you want to get high quality photos for promotions or social media, it's a great camera for that as well. You're also going to get an LCD display on the camera that can flip actually all the way up and be seen while you're facing the camera. Not all DSLR cameras have this, but many have at least an LCD display on the back of the camera. This camera also has the option for different unique lenses. So if you wanted to get, for example, a wide lens to experiment with your space and get different types of scenes or pictures, it's got the option to do that. The Sony uses what's called an E-mount. So any E-mount lens can be mounted onto the camera for different scenes. The camera also has an SD in, so you can record and capture any of your photography or your videography. Going back to the sensor in the camera, you're also going to notice a richness in color. The Exmor CMOS sensor is able to pick up a lot of rich colors in the shot. So you're going to notice the difference between the two cameras is pretty stark. The colors in the webcam, the USB cam, are going to be a little bit more flat, while the colors in the DSLR camera are going to be very rich. And there's a ton of other stuff in this camera. I'm not going to go into all the detail. You can check out the link in the description below to see all of the specifications. Just know that there's a ton that goes into a camera like this that really brings the quality of the webcam to life. So let's talk about the cost of these cameras. So the Sony a5100 comes in at about $450. Now these prices change and vary depending on where you buy. But what's really important to understand is that that's not the only cost that you're going to incur when you get a camera like this. You're going to need a stand, like I said before. You're also going to need a separate power source, and you're also going to need the Elgato Cam Link, which is going to send the signal from the camera to a USB port on your PC. And when I purchased these things, in total, those additional items were an additional $300 on top of the $450 price tag for the camera alone. Keep in mind that you're spending a lot more money on something like this, but the quality is going to be highly increased. So when we look at the Logitech c920, this camera is anywhere between 60 and 80 bucks, depending on when you buy it and where you buy it from. That's a pretty massive shift in price. And that's all you need to get. This literally mounts onto your monitor, and for the quality that you get at 1080p, 30 frames per second, it's really a great deal if you're just getting started out with live streaming. All right, so let me finish this video up by sharing my final thoughts and recommendations for either a USB or a DSLR camera. The Logitech c920, for example, as a USB camera is great for starting out. It's got great reviews. It's one of the most widely used USB cameras for live streaming. And I used this camera for probably the first year and a half, and actually bought a second one so that I could have different scenes. And it wasn't until a year and a half in that I upgraded to a DSLR camera. With good lighting and the right OBS filters, if you're using OBS as a streaming software, you can really make this camera shine. It's super reliable and a great option if you're just starting out. As for the Sony a5100, you're getting incredible quality. I really tell people that you get what you pay for when you get a camera like this. It's got great picture, it's versatile, it's a great investment if you have the disposable income and you've put a lot of time and energy, you've seen growth in your channel. It really is worth it in the end. And it's a camera that you can use for a very long time. If you have the disposable income and you really want to invest in the production quality of your stream or your YouTube videos, I highly recommend going the DSLR route. In short, if you're just starting out, go with the Logitech c920 or a USB webcam. If you've moved into full-time content creation, whether it's live streaming or YouTubing, I highly recommend upgrading the production value by getting a nice DSLR camera. And that's it for this video, you guys. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, if it was helpful for you, please consider hitting that thumbs up to let us know. And if you have any questions or comments about the cameras that we talked about in this video, or maybe you have a camera that you've been using that you'd like to let us know that has been working out great for you, please let us know in the comments section as well. And as always, you guys, to stay up to date with all things streaming and Streamloots, make sure to subscribe to the channel now and turn your alerts on so you don't miss out on the future content we have coming out for you. Thanks again, you guys, and we'll see you in the next video.